Here we go. That was a sound. You can't hear. Okay. Welcome back live to Live Your True Life Perspectives, and I'm your host, Ashley Burgess. We have a great show for you today. And today I want to talk about how every single relationship that we have, that we come into contact with, that we interact with, every single relationship pushes us forward to understand ourselves, pushes us forward to see ourselves clearly. And I find it interesting because people ask me, hey, Ashley, I really want to work on purpose. I really want to focus, after I've gotten through this toxic relationship and after I've let go of this marriage and I've moved on and I've been working to strengthen myself and I'm at that point and, I feel better about dealing with this and I understand where this is coming from and I'm not reactive anymore and I'm responding and I'm beginning to see my value as a person separate from other people. And I'm realizing that I don't need to find my value in others. And I'm at that point now to find my purpose. And I always think that purpose can be very cool and it can be very daunting all at the same time, right? Because you go, oh my God, I got to find my purpose. God, purpose is a big deal, right? I mean, it's like that's like you're not just driving up, to the fast food restaurant, and speaking into the clown's mouth and asking for purpose. This is kind of a big deal. We're like, oh, I got to think about this. This is my life. This is what I do from A to B. This is who I am. And I got to figure out purpose. Well, you know what? I'm here to tell you, I figured out some stuff about purpose. And one of the things that I figured out about purpose is that purpose is about getting to know ourselves. Purpose is about understanding who we are. Purpose is about what we're doing on this planet. But it's not about some career move. It's not about, oh my gosh, I got to do this. It's not about this, not about that. It's not about, oh, what am I going to do for a living? It's about getting to know who we are and learning who we are and what makes us tick, quite honestly. And I find that to be very interesting because I find that a lot of us get lost in the shuffle because we think that it's all about doing. Okay. We think it's all about a doing process. And obviously, I feel that purpose is great, but it's all about learning. It's all about learning. And that's where we are from A to B. That's where we are to A to B. So we have to begin to learn who we are, right? We have to begin to learn who we are. Who are we? And the way that we do this, besides the fact of going introspectively, besides the fact of understanding who we are, besides the fact of getting to know ourselves, besides the work that we do, besides the internal work that we do, besides all that stuff, the meditation, right? Besides all of those things, besides really taking that time to be our friend, the time of, being introspective, the time to really be your best friend. And I have a lot of videos out there on a platform called YouTube. If you get a chance, just go to YouTube and I'll probably put this list of videos out pretty soon. I'll see if George can do that here later on. But at the same point, it's about being your best friend and connecting with you. And those are ways that we really get to know ourselves. However, what I found is that our relationships with other people Okay, this is the caveat here. So, a lot of times we believe that we're here on this planet to have relationships with other people. The relationships with other people is great. It's great. I think though it's more of an ancillary situation. I think it's kind of an additive. It's great. And yes, we're supposed to have relationships, but we actually think that we're supposed to get to know them like inside and out, which is a good thing if we actually participate and care. But really, every time we get to know someone else more and more, we're getting to know ourselves. It's kinda like the concept of when people say, "I gave, to charity," or what have you, and giving felt so good, it was like giving to myself, and so, yeah, so that's how it all kinda comes full circle. So I wanna start today's conversation with one of the groups of people that we really get to know ourselves through. One of the groups of people that we really get to know ourselves through. And that group of people is what we call parents, right? Our parents are some of the, well, yeah, they're kind of right in the center stage. They're center stage of the people that we get to learn a lot about ourselves on. And some of you, okay, some of us, wonderful experiences, some of us not wonderful experiences, some of you completely toxic experiences, some of you somewhere in the middle, some of you didn't have really experience because they weren't ever there. Okay, some of you might have had the most amazing parents, and I know that I have some friends, some of them, very few, but some of them who actually had these amazing family experiences. And I find it interesting because I found that parents can go into two different groups, right? I apologize. There's three groups, right? So we have um, what I would like to call the ones that validate. We have the ones that don't validate, and then we have the third that, well, they aren't really present. Okay, like they don't really, they're kind of focusing on their life. The fact that you exist, well, that's great. But, I feel like there's the three types of parents. So we have the validation parents, the ones that validate what we do, that see who we are, that really work to be there and be supportive. And then we have the group that don't validate, the ones that you have to jump through hoops for, the ones that seem to never be happy, the ones that need to see other people see that you're great for them to see that you're great. You need, like, it's almost like they need to see the outside validation from other people. And until they see it, they don't really want to validate you. And then you have that group that I call kind of, they're missing, right? They're kind of, they're not mean, they're not nice, they're just kind of there. Having kids was something that happened, but it wasn't something that they put a lot of effort into. Sometimes that could be someone that's kind of lost. Sometimes it could be folks that are very self-centered and selfish. Sometimes it can be folks that really just aren't really connected with themselves emotionally, like completely unconnected emotionally with themselves, that they're so unable to connect with other people, including their children. Always an interesting dynamic, and I find that depending on that relationship, because that relationship is so it's there in your really youthful age. It starts at such an early age. It's basically the basis and structure of a lot of the ways that you think, feel, see things. And so that relationship in its own is very, very important. And so when we think about parents, yes, some of you may say, hey, to be honest with you, Ashley, I didn't have good parenting. I had to do things for myself. I found myself, scraping and scratching to get by. I really feel X, Y, Z. And I get it, and then you have folks that are like, hey, I really enjoyed, spending time with my family. And we feel like we actually, kind of see eye to eye. And that validation piece is important. However, most of us, and I would say the majority of us, were not validated by their family. Now, some of you might have been, and that's amazing, terrific, awesome. That's already, it's already like being a step ahead, right? It's like it's kind of like being born, and the day you're born, they put $1 million in your account. It's way better than that. It's worth $1 billion, right? So it's like you're validated by your family. They love you. They take care of you. You won the lottery if that's what happened when you were a kid. So most people, I feel did not win completely the parental lottery, because most of our parents don't know their value. They don't see their value, so they can't validate you. Okay. If I don't see my value, I can't validate you. I can't do something for you that I can't do for me. Okay. And that's really the hardcore truth. I don't care what title you give people, they cannot validate you unless they can validate themselves. And see, that's where we go into this emotional crossroads when we talk about parents, because that emotional crossroads means, I don't, it's like when you have the word parent, mom, dad, like that automatically conjures something in your mind, right? It automatically conjures that they're supposed to be at that level. Like you don't sit there and say best friend about somebody that you don't care about. You don't sit there and say, "Oh, my bestie," unless it's like one of your besties. Now, some of you might go around telling everybody they're a bestie. I get it. I get it. You're politically correct. You should run for office. But the thing is that I feel that for the most part, when we look at this parent dynamic, and we see it and we understand it and we understand that that validation piece is what's missing for most of humanity, we begin to see the conundrum of what we're dealing with here. Because, honestly, the system is rigged this way where it's cycle after cycle, pattern after pattern. The only way to break the cycle pattern is to have awareness and knowledge. The only way to get awareness and knowledge in the situation is to look outside of yourself and then begin to look introspectively, right? And finding someone really quick here, finding someone quite honestly that understands the situation and has been there, done that, validated themselves, done it the right way, continues to do it, knows how to do it on a daily basis, teaches you how to do it and how you get there. That's the only way that we pass up the cycle. That's it. That's it. And so a lot of times, right, we have a lot of family members that don't want to work with somebody because they think it makes them look weak. We have folks that don't even know that this exists. We have people that don't even have an idea that validation is a big deal. We don't even most people don't even realize that the reason why they get into toxic relationships and let people walk all over them is because they want the other person to validate them. I mean, right there, that's it. I mean, mic drop. I'm done. We'll be done. We're going to take a break for a while. No, seriously. But think about it. It's about the validation. If this person sees my value, then I'm good. I'm golden. But isn't it interesting how when people see our value or they validate us, it's interesting because a lot of times the validation itself doesn't matter. You know why? When you can have a bunch of people validate you and that validation doesn't seem to matter, is because the only real validation that matters is the validation of yourself. I know. It's like, it's kind of deep. I know. I get it. It's a lot there today. It's a lot to take in. I know you're like, it's Saturday and I've only had 2 cups of coffee. This is too much. But yeah, so like the parent concept, it's like, okay, I get it. But we have to sit there and yes, we have to see the problems in the system. And I know a lot of people go, well, I don't want to harp on my parents. My parents did the best they could. It's not about harping on them. It's just about seeing the truth. And then some of you might have had good ones that really did show the validation piece and help you to learn who you are. But again, each one of these relationships, no matter how healthy or toxic it was, what did it do? It actually got you to look within yourself. Sometimes some of the most unhealthy relationships in our life are some of the most powerful relationships in our life, as long as we allow ourselves to see it that way. It's all about a shift in perspective. Okay. Because it's hard. It's like the concept of yes and no. Right? We want to hear, we've been taught our whole life we want to hear yes, right? But when we hear no, we're like, oh, is it because they don't like me or they don't want to do this or they, and no creates all this internal static and pain. When sometimes when we get no from somebody, it could be the absolute best thing that we ever get in our life, and it's the one saving grace. So when I return, I'm going to be talking more about the relationships that we have, how they mirror us, how we're able to learn about ourselves more, how we're able to understand ourselves more, because that's key. And we're going to go through all that. I'm going to explain the different types of relationships, how that happens, what you can do, all that good stuff. And we got a great show coming up. Also later on in the hour, Dan Nelson's going to be here live in studio here. And Live Your True Life Perspectives will be back this time in 2 shakes. How was the audio? Is it good? Okay. Hey guys, glad everybody's tuned in today. Okay. It's good to have everybody here today. We are still having a couple audio issues with the board, trying to understand what is not hooked up properly. It's something on this end, but we're still trying to figure it out. We have 1 minute. 1 minute. 1 whole minute left till the next segment on the show. 1 solid minute. Right? For the show. We'll sing a song about the 1 minute. 1 minute. 1 minute. 1 minute. 1 minute. 1 minute. There we go. We're about to do our second segment in 30 seconds. See, guys, I did this all on purpose so you wouldn't have to have commercials. See, that's the key. I care. Well, I didn't want you to have the commercials on here, but it would be nice to be able to hear the intros. But I know we'll get to that. We'll figure it out, and then I'll figure out how to take the commercials out. Welcome back live to Live Your True Life Perspectives, and I'm your host, Ashley Burgess. Glad that you're here today, here live on Live Your True Life Perspectives. We're having a great show. And today, I've been talking about the concept of how every single relationship in our life, honestly, and absolutely pushes forward the relationship that we have with ourselves. No joke. That's what we got here. No joke. Every relationship, no matter if we consider them healthy, positive, unhealthy, toxic, deranged, doesn't matter how we define it, but it helps us to see who we are. Because again, when we go back to the concept of purpose, folks have who we are. Without that other person, we wouldn't really be able to understand who we are as far as what really makes us tick, because every interaction takes us to another level of understanding. And so when we return to be talking more about our relationships, more about our friends, and even getting a little deeper into our enemies, that can also people that have been somewhat of an enemy in our life. Don't forget, Dan Nelson will be here in just a few minutes here in the next segment, talking about the giving us the historical perspective, which is so fun. So stay tuned. Live your true life perspectives with your host, me, Ashley Burgess, will be back in. Be back this time in 2 shakes. What in the hell is going on? Why is this happening? Why did it just end in the middle of this? This is ridiculous. We are hooked up to the Ethernet. What is going on with this?
So I could try to connect to the internet again, and then it just stopped for like a whole minute.
Is it the same feed?
Should be, yeah, same feed, yeah.
Okay, good. I just feel bad for people that are watching this. Y'all, I feel bad for you. I mean, we're trying to figure out this. We're having a tough time with this. Is it the software, you think?
No, it looks like it's just the internet thing. Messing things up.
I just don't know why it would keep changing. But did we delete all these?
Yeah, they're all deleted.
Why are they still showing up?
I think it's just showing like it's what's available.
Oh, okay. But we can't delete those to not have them up there anymore?
Um,
That's what we need to do.
it says it's not going to try to hook up to
Okay. I don't know why it's showing us what's available, but we don't want it.
Alright.
This is crazy. Can you grab that white chair for me and let's put it right here? You can mark it for me too. Over there. And then can you move this black thing? I just wrenched my neck yesterday. Oh my god, so much Advil. The Advil company, I need to get stock. There we go. Let's grab Dan. The Advil company. Okay, guys, sorry about that. Again, it's ridiculous. Hey, Dan, how's it going?
Good.
Good to see you.
See you. Are we live?
Well, yeah. I mean, we've been having a little bit of issues with the live studio feed here, but okay.
Left out there, and I opened the door. This guy left them. He said,
Oh.
"These are for Ashley."
Oh, perfect.
So if there's a card, it's from that person. But there's
Okay.
not a card. It's from George and I.
Okay, perfect. We can put it in the kitchen. Thank you, sweetheart. That was very nice.
I'm like, man, it's like it's connected physically.
Now, what is that about?
This some guy with a short beard.
Oh yeah.
Like a delivery guy.
Okay. It's probably my mom's in the hospital, so probably.
Oh, maybe somebody
Yeah.
thoughtful.
Yeah. it
More
probably-
than George and I.
Yeah. Well, y'all. I'll just say they're from y'all. How's that?
Maybe there's a card.
I appreciate it. Okay, see, we got.
Do you want shorter or longer? I got both. And in between.
Okay. You got shorter and longer.
Yeah. I don't really have anything like, failed parents, maybe a little bit. So that's cool. Coming here, I could hear it through the wall.
What?
I can hear it through the wall, so I know what you're talking
Oh,
about.
good.
I have to turn it off when I'm on hold.
Good. Sorry, this is like loud in my ear. I'm like, what? I can't hear you. Yeah, let's do
Sound check?
what do you got? Medium?
Oh.
What we got for timing?
Whatever you want. Because this one can always be split. So if you've got more material today, I can do the short one,
Okay.
which is an interesting story. This is the medium and this is the long. If you want something juicy, the longer is juicy, but it might take two sessions to do. I can probably get through it in one.
Which one's this one about?
This one is an interesting one. It's about you would never guess, and it ties to a lot of things about when the Scottish tried to settle Panama.
Oh.
Yeah, you think of Panama, I think Spain.
Yeah, you don't think about
Scotsmen.
Scots.
Yeah, they're not hanging out in the jungle much. So it's ties to a lot of stuff. It looks short, but I can tie it to a lot of things.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, tie it to some cool stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, the video keeps stopping. Some folks are commenting about how the video keeps stopping as I'm trying to watch. Is it?
It's good now since it got fixed there, but it was that big. It was that gap.
Okay, so Brittany's letting us know we're about to go on. Welcome back live to Live Your True Life Perspectives, and I'm your host, Ashley Burgess. On today's show, I'm talking about the single relationship. Every relationship that you've ever had directly relates, every single one, to who you are. It mirrors us. It helps us to see ourselves. It helps us to understand who we are. It helps us to really get to that point of really seeing our true self. Living our true life. That's the concept, right? It's all about that. And it's interesting. I was bringing up right before the break the concept of the significant other. Whether you're married or not married doesn't really matter, but you're spending a lot of time with this person one way or another. You're interacting with them a lot one way or another. And it's interesting how, as we talk about some of the people that are closest to us, we can have some of the best relationships. Some of the people that are closest to us, we can have some of the most challenging relationships. I find that the more we're around somebody, the more we let it all hang out. The more we're around somebody, the more that we have a tendency of what? We have a tendency of, taking it for granted sometimes. I mean, come around year 2. I mean, come on. If you haven't taken your relationship for granted, you're 7 years in, 10 years in, then I am extremely impressed with your ability to have gratitude. But as a human being, the human being is almost devised to literally be that way over a period of time. Okay. And so we have to work really hard not to take other people for granted. But at the same point in time, sometimes our significant others can be very helpful, and sometimes our significant others can be very helpful. You heard that, right? They can be very helpful in a way that we see helpful. They can be very helpful in a way that we see hurtful, right? So that's a very interesting concept to think about. And if you really think about that concept intrinsically on a deep level, you begin to realize that a lot of times, even though we feel like we're in pain and agony, sometimes we have to leave that relationship. Sometimes they leave us, right? And that's the catalyst to our change. It's the catalyst to what we have to do. Like, we wouldn't have done anything in the relationship differently until they left us, right? And it's like that had to take that to have the wake up call. Now, I have seen some relationships where neither one has left, but if you walk into the situation and you're looking at it from a separate pair of eyes, you're saying to yourself, wow, why are these people still going through this process? And nobody's opening up the lines of communication. What I've realized is the less we communicate, the more problems we have. The less we communicate, the more problems we have. The more we're able to communicate and talk with one another, the more that we're able to understand one another, the more we're able to understand ourselves. I know some of you out there, you feel like you're walking on eggshells. You come home, you want to talk about how you feel, but you feel like you can't, so you keep it all in. And that becomes a big problem because you feel like you're sacking all your emotions and feelings inside of you and you're losing yourself. Okay. And that's true. That's not a dramatic way of looking at it. It's true. In all honesty, to some degree, you are kind of losing yourself because you are unable to communicate your feelings with the person that you're supposed to be able to communicate your feelings with. I mean, heck, it's like when we put somebody in that spouse, girlfriend, boyfriend role, that's a big role. That's a hardcore role. That's a big one. You don't just put anybody in there, right? I mean, that's the thing. So it's like we have to look at that significant other and say, okay, I understand that we got some good times. I understand that there's certain things, though, about this relationship that just don't seem to work. How do we make this work? Okay, what is my issue with this? What is my trigger point with this? And some of the arguments that we can have with them, it's very interesting. What I found, too, is that when people get into arguments, and this is really across the board, I find that sometimes people can be saying stuff to you about you, but I find that some of the stuff that comes out of their mouth is directly related to stuff about them. And the more unconscious somebody is to their reality, the more that they think that what they're saying to you is for you, even though it's a direct comment to themselves. The more aware and conscious an individual is, the more they realize that what comes out of their mouth needs to be said properly because you can't ever take it back. But I understand being in the heat of the moment. I get it. I mean, we've all done it. I understand saying things that you wish you could take back, but you can't. But it's interesting how we react to certain things. And it's not until we begin to step back emotionally and see that the arguments that we have with our spouse, well, some of them have to do directly with our spouse, but some of them have to do directly with how we feel deep down inside about how we feel about something what we may not have actually come into fruition and thought of based on the fact that we haven't really thought about it consciously, whatever that issue is. And so the argument's probably not anywhere about what the argument is. It's something in the middle that's generating some sort of emotional response. Right. And that's where we really need to go. That's where the rubber meets the road. Because then we realize, okay, I'm not really arguing the fact that this person, took my toothpaste. I'm not arguing the fact and the fact that they took my toothpaste and it's and they didn't tell me they took the toothpaste, and now they got the toothpaste in the bathroom, and now I know it, and they lied to me. It's not about the toothpaste. It's not about the items. A lot of times what we're holding on to is resentment, but the resentment is coming from other things in the relationship that we have to understand and determine, excavate those issues, and come out the other side, not only getting to know them and having communication, but helping us to understand us completely. And that's what I find is extremely valuable. That's what I find is powerful. And that's where we need to be at, quite honestly. I mean, that's where I feel like we have to be at. And so once we understand that, we're exactly where we need to be. So, yeah. So let's talk a little bit about, well, let's talk about historical perspective. I find it interesting. And we're going to talk more about relationships. We're going to talk more about our relationships. We're going to talk more about the enemies. We're going to talk more about when we hear yes and no, because remember, these are all big concepts here. These are all big concepts because a lot of times when we have somebody toxic around us, right, it's creating that reality that makes us get upset. We have the argument, we're fighting them. We begin on the battlefield every day with that person. All we see is the battle, but we don't realize that the battle is not about the argument and who wins. The battle is actually getting to know ourselves. Okay, and that's what it is. When we deflect into something else, that's when we lose the war. Okay, so when I return, we're talking about this, but I really want to get into this concept of our historical perspective. And so we have our resident historian here, Dan Nelson, in studio today. Dan, great to see you. How are you doing today?
Doing great, Ashley. Glad to be here.
I'm glad to have you here. Glad to have you. So let me know, what are you talking about today?
Well, this is sort of a curious story that came about when someone's ancestor had gone on a ship, on an expedition. You think leaving Scotland, they're going to come to America or Canada maybe, but this person actually went to Panama, and you're like, what? Panama? I never heard of any Scotsmen going to Panama. There's, nobody with a Mick in front of their name down there. And so it turns out that many years ago, and of course, you always hear nowadays, oh, the stock market's going to have a bubble. The real estate market's going to have a bubble. Well, bubbles have been going on for years. One of the earliest ones in history was the tulip bubble. Everybody wanted to own tulip bulbs. So there was a bubble called the South Seas bubble, and this was part of it. So you had all these Scotsmen and some Englishmen who got together and said, we're going to form a company, basically a Scottish company that competed with like the East India Company and other charter companies. And these companies basically had sovereign rights wherever they operated, and they didn't pay taxes for a while. So it was a good gig if you could be a shareholder in one of these companies and go out and sort of profit from the new world. So a very powerful person, William Patterson, convinced all these people that the best scheme was for them to establish a colony in Panama. It was called Darien. And when you think about Panama, you're like, why would they go there? Well, they saw the same thing you see today when you look at a map. Of course, recently we've all been talking about the Suez Canal and why it's delaying us having our consumer goods. Well, Panama was a quicker way viewed as if you could figure it out. Of course, it took many years to build the Panama Canal, but if you could figure it out, you could capture a lot of trade between the Atlantic and the Pacific without going through the danger of rounding Cape Horn. So they sent this colony out to Panama, and it was quite a few people. I mean, they had, I think, over 1,200 people landed successfully in this little place called Darien, which you could find on a map today if you were studying a map of Panama. It's got a little accent over the E now. It didn't have back then. And they were really poorly provisioned, and then they just really weren't ready for the geography, the climate, the topography. So they didn't do well, and then the Spanish found out they were there and came and killed a bunch of them, and others died from disease and so forth. And the survivors went back, on the remaining ship. But the interesting thing is, you say, okay, that happened. A few people, lost some time and lives and treasure and all that. But it was just so significant. It took 25% of the wealth out of Scotland was lost on that expedition because it was so big to finance it, and so many people had jumped in. It's like we hear today, ooh, GameStop. Okay, well, that was GameStop. Everybody had to get in. You don't want to miss out. Well, they're all in, and then the thing's a failure. So it actually had a lot to do, because people say, well, why is Scotland part of the United Kingdom? Why did it become not, say, sort of a separate country? Mm-hmm. part of it was they had so much debt at that point in time, they basically had to say, hey, we'll let you take us over and you'll relieve us of the debt. And that was how Scotland became part of England. So bubbles can have, or became part of Great Britain, which was, England was where all the power was. So it really tells you how, a bubble can end up turning into really some severe consequences. You can personally lose your money, but whole countries can basically go bankrupt if they get a big enough bubble. We had one, was it 10 years ago with Iceland? Something like that, where basically and they've dug their way out, but countries basically get so enamored with, oh, it's always going to get better. It's always going to be greater than it is. People don't have reserves. They just bet it all. And then, it can blow up on them. So that was an early story that, I'd come across there. And eventually somebody did figure out how to build a canal across Panama. But that's another story for another day. There was
You don't want to go there? You don't want to go there?
No, there was several hundred years in between those attempts. But people have been trying to figure out how to corner the market on trade since people started trading.
It's interesting. The whole concept of history is interesting because a lot of stuff you find, though, it's pretty hard. I mean, you have to look high and low to find some of this, right?
Yeah, I'd never heard this story before, and I'm a history buff, obviously, and I just never come across it. If it hadn't been for this person going on this expedition, and he lived, by the way, and later went to America. So let's hear it for James Christie. He was a survivor. But if it hadn't been that he'd gone, I don't know that I would have ever come across the story because it's fairly well buried. It's not like I ordered a book on it and read the book because I was that intrigued by it. But it's not like something you come across in a class or in a textbook. It was maybe in Scotland or something. I don't know. But the rest of the world doesn't really know much about it. And it's just interesting to think of, these. It's one thing to sort of wrap your head around Spanish conquistadors going across Panama and, seeking their fortune. And we can all get that in our head because we've heard so many stories about, the Spanish in the desert, the Spanish in the jungle, basically breaking into the New World. But you don't think about Scotsmen down there with their kilts in the jungle swatting at mosquitoes. Nobody's made that movie. It's waiting.
That could be interesting.
Yeah, it's waiting to be made.
That could be an interesting movie. It could be an interesting movie. No, because I haven't really heard a lot of the stuff that you talk about. I haven't really heard a lot. I haven't really come across it on Google or anything like that. So I do find it pretty fascinating.
It was funny listening to the show so far. I had dinner last night with some people in a network group, but the guy sitting across from me, he was talking about his parents' divorce, and he said his father's main requirement that his mother pay for him to have the History Channel on cable TV because he was a history buff and he wanted him to still have that access to history. And I thought, well, now that's pretty cool when, divorces start deciding what TV channels are going to be left. So, everybody's got to have their legacy. So I guess his dad was to make sure that his son had access to history. And to this day, he's a history buff and interested in it. So.
That's pretty cool. That's really cool. And I know many of you out there listening are like, yes, my parents went through a divorce, or when your parents went through divorce, you definitely went through the divorce as well. And it depends on how old you were. And I think, the younger it depends, the older it depends, and how it affects us, right?
Yep, absolutely. It's not something that the parents just do on their own. A lot of times parents think they can hide some of that trauma from their children, but kids are a lot more intuitive than we give them credit for.
And it's interesting too. I find that, in this dynamic, a lot of times folks want to stay together because they don't want to break up the family. And I find that, yes, kids are very connected to the source. And so the younger, the more aware these children are. And I've realized that there's really no covering that up. And I know that folks out there, you've been through it or you're going through the process. It's not about beating yourself up. It's about how to create the most positive environment you can in that situation, how to create a positive environment for you, how to create a positive environment for your soon-to-be ex as well as your children, and non-toxic environment. And this is all very important, so this is all very important stuff. And we'll be talking more here at the end of the hour on some more of these relationships. Dan, so amazing to have you here today.
I was glad to be here. It was an interesting show. I do see these patterns in families where generation after generation, things fall apart, they get married again, and it falls apart again, and then the kids do the same thing. I mean, you talked about it. If somebody isn't intentional in terms of changing that dynamic, it just continues to go.
So true. Dan will be back next week for sure here. And in the meantime, stay tuned because we're talking more about these relationships, more about how to really connect, more about how to understand yourself, some tips and tricks on how to do that, how to be your best friend, which is even cooler because guess what? We actually have the opportunity to be our best friend, which is so cool. So stay tuned because Live Your True Life Perspectives with me, your host, Ashley Burgess. Well, we'll be back this time in 2 shakes.
The whole time you were doing that, I was assuming that was my time. So I was hoping it wasn't some other time.
Oh, it was great.
No, it's 2 minutes more.
15 minutes more.
Yeah, wait, you're off. You're on.
20 minutes
I'm
more.
like, she wouldn't put that up unless I was supposed to look at it.
Yeah, you're like, it's all a scam.
Because that's what I do with my own. But I
Yeah.
thought, you're tracking like other stuff.
Oh, I know. It's like tracking this, tracking that.
Right.
We got all kinds of tracking stuff going on right now.
Yeah.
We have a little audio issue. That's been the kind of the
I heard
issue.
you guys
Yeah, it's been
almost cursing in the other room.
can't do that, but yeah, getting as close as we can on the cursing, but as far as we can in the cursing. But yeah, so we've been working on that. There's like the board is not producing the sound from the Lucy Live into the board. And so the Lucy Live was working from the direct connection satellite setup to the station a few weeks ago. And then one day it just stopped. So I can hear it now, just now when I plugged into the other system here. But the problem is that I can't hear myself then when I do that. So you lose one thing, get something, right? The good thing though is that the folks here are not having to hear all the rattling on of the radio stuff here, which is helpful. But I would like to be able to have like the intros and stuff where it doesn't just seem so hodgepodged. And then we had a live studio issue on here, not the radio station, but this thing stopped working for us.
Well, that's why you went into radio for the technical
I
challenge.
know.
I don't have enough with my computer at home. I want to come here.
I want more. Can I get another computer?
Yeah. Can you bring something else that's broken?
Bring something else in. Yeah, we'll record some of that stuff too here in a second. And go through that. Is the audio sounding okay?
Oh, yeah.
Did Dan's segment sound good?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it sounded good on this side.
Okay, we have a few more minutes left till our last segment. Thank you all for staying here. I'm not trying to touch anything on this restream thing. I don't want to cause it any pain because it seems to be a little, I don't know, persnickety. Hopefully next week we won't go offline again. We're trying. 30 seconds. Welcome back live to Live Your True Life Perspectives, and I'm your host, Ashley Burgess. On today's show, we've been talking about how every relationship actually helps to mirror your relationship with yourself. We just heard Dan Nelson, our resident historian. He'll be back next week as well. And it's interesting how we learn a lot about ourselves through these relationships. And earlier, before our historical perspective, I was talking about the concept of being able to learn from our significant other, being able to see our truth based on our interactions with our significant other. And I know that some of you have interactions that are really, really positive, and you have these deep conversations and you get to do all this stuff and you go, wow, I mean, I really connected with my spouse and I really got to know myself. And then some of you are like, you know what? Basically, we argue all the time. And then some of you are like, you know what? We're both shut down, or one person shut down. You know, it is what it is. But what I've realized is that in these relationships, we begin to learn a lot about ourselves, no matter what it is, no matter if it's positive or more negative, no matter if it's really healthy or somewhat toxic. What I found, though, is that the arguments usually that we have with the other person, well, there's some big arguments, but usually some of the arguments are quite small. And these smaller arguments are always very interesting because it's not about the argument. It's about the stuff that's left unsaid in the middle. It's about the other stuff. It's about that other stuff that gets us to know about ourselves and the other person. But it's interesting how there's a tendency of taking things personally. It's interesting to hear what someone else is saying, but a lot of times the things that are being said are not really directed toward us. It's directed toward the person that's actually saying it, depending on how conscious or unconscious we are and how aware. The last thing I really want to talk about today is the yes or no concept. And folks, that's tend to give us some pain in our life, because I found that the more pain that someone gives us, yes, initially, is there an anger response? Yes. Initially, are we kind of stuck? Yes. Do we eventually overcome? Yes, we work at it. But the only way to learning in this situation, in this situation is to actually see it for what it is. See the situation for what it truly is. Right? Because a lot of times we lose sight of it. We go, oh my gosh, this relationship's falling apart. I feel XYZ. I feel horrible. But we don't really see, okay, this is a learning tool for me. This is for me to understand me. This is for me to really see who I am. This is for me to understand how I value myself. This is for me to begin to see how I can validate myself instead of looking toward other people to validate me. Okay, because it's interesting. One of the biggest arguments I find is really the kind of the underlining argument is the fact that you're doing all this stuff for the other person. They don't see your value. No matter what you do, they still don't see your value. You keep trying over and over again to get them to see your value. They don't. You keep coming up short. Then there's the internal battle where you feel like you're beating yourself up over that because you feel bad about that situation, because you're not happy with how you're feeling about in your life. And so there's multiple layers of situations going on here. The concept of yes or no, when somebody tells us no, how hard and how painful that can feel. And it's interesting because I found that sometimes when we just shift our perspective a little bit, the no is really not the problem. It's really the yes sometimes. All this is about seeing perspective. The biggest arguments we can have with people, if we internalize that argument, yes, that's one thing. If we don't internalize that argument and we see it for what it is by actually being able to see more internally into ourselves, we begin to see the lesson and the value within why we're living that in that moment. Remembering when we deflect on other people's issues, it can be helpful for us to understand the other person. However, that is personal deflection. And that deflection really takes us off target from doing what? From living our purpose. What's our purpose? From learning who we are, from learning ourselves at the core and being able to accept and validate ourselves on our own, aka unconditionally loving ourselves day in and day out, second by second. If you haven't already, check out the website, ashleyburgess.com, ashleyburgess.com. Also on YouTube, new video content up every week, as well as the live feeds on Facebook and YouTube. Just go to YouTube and put in Ashley Burgess, Ashley, Berges. So in the meantime, it's all about living our true life. It's all about connecting and having that happiness. It's all about creating that happiness from within, because that's really the only way we get it. We can only get validation from within. We can only get our happiness from within. Other people can validate us, but their validation is great. But until we validate ourselves, again, it doesn't matter. People can hold validation from us. That's fine. But when they're holding it from us, that's all we want, because we haven't found it within ourselves. And eventually when we find it, guess what? We don't need theirs anymore. So things to think about. I look forward to seeing you next week. There'll be a great live show next week as well. Don't know exactly what we'll be talking about, but you know what? We'll figure it out before the show. So I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Hope you have some stuff planned that you want to do. Maybe it's just hanging out. Maybe it's getting to know yourself. Maybe it's seeing purpose. Maybe it's just relaxing. So stay tuned in next week. Live your true life perspectives with me, your host, Ashley Burgess, will be back in. Well, you know what? I'll be back this time in 3 shakes. Awesome. Thank you, Brittany. We appreciate you. Have a great weekend. Thanks everybody for tuning in. I appreciate y'all for tuning in. Dan and I are here in the studio. We're going to actually record some stuff here in just a bit, so that'll be fun, and I'll be back next week as well, so looking forward to that. If you have any ideas for shows that you'd like me to talk about, I can definitely go through that. And also any sort of historical perspective that you would like to maybe learn about from Dan, which could be really cool too. Because the neatest thing about a lot of his stuff is that I don't see it. I mean, I can't just like go and look that up. It's not something that's readily there. And so that's powerful. But in the meantime, if you have any sort of thoughts on shows, content, direction, I am not all ears because I don't have, my ears aren't that big, but I do, but I am all ears as far as being there to connect with what you have to say and learning about, the direction you'd like me to talk about. So if you want to go to ashleyburgess.com, just go to that contact page. You can just send me an email. Or you can make comments right here. Probably in the comment section would be good too. Also, if you're on Facebook, I appreciate you catching the show. If you're on YouTube, I appreciate you catching the show. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. I think our subscribers are about 18% of our viewers. I think so. Yeah, so we'll catch up with that at some point. But hey, we're happy to have that. But just want to connect more. And also, there's an opportunity on YouTube to join. And get some other content that obviously we put out good content on the channel, but other content too. I'm actually posting some of my all the episodes actually from the celebrity perspective. That's an Amazon Prime original show there, and I'm putting all those on the join option. So if you join the show, if you join it, you have access to those, which is cool. We actually got a Telly Award for that. When we came out, so we're really stoked about that. But yeah, so we're putting out some other content as well, taking kind of a step further on some, getting really deep into some of the concepts when it comes to relationships and understanding, the value proposition and understanding some of the toxicity and what we go through for that process. So definitely thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you all have a wonderful weekend, and we will try to get this stream corrected for next week. I just appreciate everybody to hanging in there, and you're awesome. So let us know if you need anything. And it looks like I finally get to see actually some of y'all's comments for the first time today. So great to see y'all. Car, Starseed, great to see you. Craig, great to see you. Zen and me, thank you so much. Josie, great to see you. John, how are you doing? Ashish, good to see you. Let's see here. Eiffel Tower, great to see you. How are you doing? Yazine, thank you. You are the best too. I appreciate it. Jen, good to see you in from Tulsa. Awesome. Please save this live. Okay. Got it. Understand. It's going to be up here, so don't worry. We will not erase it. Let's see. I'm really struggling, Jen. Let me know what you're struggling on. Please comment. Let me know what's going on. Definitely a lot of my shows and content about relationships. Fiery, but mostly friendly. Great to see you. Player one, let's see. Great to see you. I appreciate that comment as well. Your content in this channel is life-changing. I appreciate it. I often find myself denying things you were right about, but now things are more clear because of your insight. I do appreciate that. Thank you so much. Jen, great to see you. Let's see, John. Okay, we can talk about that. Actually, yeah, I could definitely talk about that on a show. It wouldn't be a bad idea, actually. Yeah, I'm writing it down right now, so I appreciate it. That's a great idea. We could definitely do a show on that. Naz, great to see you. How are you doing? It's so great to see y'all. And I don't know how to actually pronounce like Kaur. I don't want to totally butcher your name. I appreciate you for tuning in. Car, I think I would say Car, maybe Car. I think it's Car. Car, thank you so much for tuning in. Spiritual Awakenings, totally. Let me know. I don't like to butcher anybody's name because, people would always kind of butcher my last name a little bit, Burgess or whatever, Burgers. But either way, I'm here, and I really appreciate y'all for tuning in and for actually commenting. And I'm just now seeing them. They weren't coming up earlier, or I would have actually communicated earlier. When I put on the chat earlier, it was just blank. So I apologize for that. Not that I'm overlooking it, just sometimes the technical difficulties it's just a lot. But anyway, I appreciate y'all for tuning in. Have a great weekend. Remember to check out the contact page on ashleyburgess.com to send me any sort of communication, especially any sort of content that you'd like me to cover. Some of you already talked about the content you'd like me to cover. I've written some of those down. And in the meantime, have a wonderful weekend and let me know how you're doing. Take care. Bye, y'all.